Alright, Ronan MMA, welcome back to the channel. Now, UFC Fight Night Dariush vs. Tsarukyan takes place this Saturday. This is one of the best fight nights in recent memory. We are here to do a picks and a brief preview for every single fight on the card. I will start with the first fight of the night and work our way up. I will go through the earlier ones a little bit faster so I can spend more time on the co-main and the main event and things like that. So let us get started immediately with the first fight of the night, which is Veronica Hardy versus Jamie Lynn Horth. Okay, so Veronica Hardy had a tough go of it from like 2016 to 2020-ish. She took a good chunk of time off because she is pretty young, so she can afford to do that. And then she came back and had a phenomenal performance against Juliana Miller. And I believe in that fight, I can't remember the odds exactly, but she was a pretty massive underdog. That was just earlier this year. Her grappling looked great. Her striking looked much improved. Like everything about her game seemed to have improved during that time off, which is nice to see. Jamie Lynn Horth, a fellow Canadian, okay, she's undefeated so far, won her debut in the UFC last time out against Haley Cowan, who was also making her debut. Jamie Lynn Horth seems to have the finishing capabilities, or at the very least, the percentage of how many times she finishes a fight is higher than that of Veronica Hardy. But you know, Veronica Hardy's fought much better competition. She's been in the UFC for a good while, even with that time off. Like, there's a good chunk of time where she didn't have any fights. She still has quite a bit more experience than Jamie Lynn Horth here. I wish I could go with my countrywoman, but I haven't been ultra impressed by her. She hasn't fought as good of competition. She's getting up there in age, and considering how good Hardy looked last time out, and considering she's still only 28 years old, I think that she could potentially be improving still. So, as I said earlier, her takedown defense was on point in her last fight. Her striking looked great. She had her opponent panicking and starting to shoot panic shots, and then that enabled her to actually get in top position when she felt the need to, and she did work from there also. She literally outclassed her in every single aspect of mixed martial arts, and like I said, I think she will still be improving. I'm going to go with her to get the job done by unanimous decision. Moving up the card to Wellington Turman versus Jared Gooden. Okay, Turman's a slight favorite here despite being on a 2-fight skid. Dude's a complete submission machine when he's doing his best work. I think he's got like 8 finishes by submission or something like that. He usually loses by decision, but he has gotten knocked out a couple of times. He's actually beaten some pretty decent competition, but throughout the time in the UFC, he's been ultra inconsistent. You oftentimes on his record see 1 win, 1 loss, 1 win, 2 losses, things like this. I think the longest win streak he's been able to string together in the UFC is 2. Do you know what I mean? So he's pretty inconsistent. Jared Gooden also coming off of a loss to Carlston Harris, which was his debut, and or his debut in a second attempt at a UFC career, right? In his first attempt, he was not so successful, went 1-3. And I think he got finished a couple of times to boot. Wins most of the time by knockout. He has a good amount of subs and decisions also, so it's not like he's severely lacking in one area. His only win in the UFC that actually was by KO was against Stoltz. That was a good while ago. Do you know what I mean? So all those knockouts appear to be from lesser organizations, not so much his time in the big leagues. I'm going to go with Wellington Turman here. I just don't know that Jared Gooden is actually UFC material, especially considering he had one chance already. And then he does okay, but he still loses to guys that weren't even really good enough to cut it in the UFC, like Impa Kasanganay, who wasn't a horrible fighter, but he didn't have a whole lot of success, had to go to the PFL to find success, right? Jared Gooden lost to him in that time off in between his first and his second UFC stint, and then he comes back and loses his second attempt fight. The problem here is that he's never been submitted. He usually loses by decision, so I could potentially see Wellington Turman getting a decision here. Maybe he'll find the submission later on in the fight, but who knows. Moving up the card to Rodolfo Bellato versus Ihor Potieria. All right, Bellato making his debut after a KO victory on the Contender Series here. Something notable is that his only 2 losses on his record, I think he's like 11-2 or something like that, come to Vitor Petrino, okay, who is an absolute fucking freak. Other than that, he's been perfect, and I don't think that getting knocked out by this guy, even if it was twice, I'm talking about Vitor Petrino still, I don't think that says anything about his chin. That guy hits, I think if that guy hits anybody clean, you're going to fucking sleep. Guy's got 6 KOs, 4 subs, and only 1 ever win by decision. So he is an absolute finishing machine, or at the very least up until this point. Ihor Potieria he's had 3 fights in the UFC thus far after a successful Contender Series fight. He's gone 1-2 since then, right? I think he got finished by Carlos Ulberg, and also this is just the last name, bro. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it correctly. Chill the fuck out, Negamuranu, okay? You know. The only guy that he's beaten so far was Shogun, and that was a very old Shogun to boot. Now, it was an impressive finish and shit like that, but still, you know, most people at that stage, I feel as though could probably beat an old Shogun. Now, He's been KO'd 3 times throughout his career, and none of them are Vitor Petrino, okay? And 2 of them were in his last 3 fights. So, and then when you go back and look at his earlier record, you see some really shitty records on the sides of his opponent pre-UFC also, so maybe a little bit of a padded record there to boot, right? He did have quite a bit of hype on him coming in. I think I'm going to be going with BELLATO here to get the job done, probably by way of knockout, because I just don't think that Ihor Potieria is actually going to live up to what people may have thought he would have back then before he or you know, when he first signed. Moving up the card, 2, Steve Garcia versus Mikelazao. I don't fucking know, dude. Costa, either way. All right, Costa is a huge favorite here, although Steve Garcia has been pretty successful so far. He's 3-1 in the UFC as of right now, and one win to me that stands out is the win over Chase Hooper. About a year ago, I don't think that I would pay that any mind. I'd be like, yeah, I mean, well, fuck, he's a kid, right? But it's kind of aged pretty well. Chase Hooper has been looking better every time out, and while he did get him a couple of years ago, so it was before some of that progression, it still ages pretty well. Nurden Becky's also a pretty good win, right? Now, Costa's only loss in the UFC comes to Thiago Moises, which, by the way, was his debut. That is an insanely difficult opponent to get handed on your debut. And I can't remember the circumstances perfectly, but I could be incorrect about this, but I recall that it was like a short notice opportunity or something along those lines. Or maybe they were just trying to, you know, fast track this kid. But regardless, Thiago Moises is a harder fight than anybody Steve Garcia has fought up until this point, and he's, you know, 4 fights into his UFC career. Then he goes back and he gets a bounce back victory over Austin Lengo, pardon me, winning by unanimous decision. Garcia has only been finished 2 times, okay? 1 KO and 1 sub. When he usually loses, Jesus, okay? It's usually by decision, right? He's also got 11 knockouts, so the guy's got fucking knockout power for sure. Now, I'm going to say this. I don't know that I would bet on this fight, just a little caveat there, just because of how large the odds are. Based on my pick, I am going to go with Costa. I do think that he's skilled, very talented, and he could potentially be something. He's also still pretty young, right? Steve Garcia, while he's been, you know, pretty successful, I just don't know to what level, because some of the opponents that he's fought have not been even close to a Thiago Moises, and I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to go with Costa to get the job done here, but as I said, this is not one that I would bet on based on those odds. If you were going to throw money down, Steve Garcia seems like a pretty live dog to me. Moving up the card, 2, KLOSE versus Joe Solecki. I think I'm going to go with Joe Solecki here to get the job done. The only thing is that I'm having trouble with is that KLOSE has never been submitted in his career, and that is usually what Joe Solecki tends to go for. KLOSE, though, is getting up there in age, especially for those lower weight classes, right? He's been in the UFC for 7 years. Almost, and for the most part has been pretty damn successful doing it. I think he's only lost a couple of times, and they're not horrible competition either. Joe Solecki, as I said, though, younger fighter. He's only lost to Jared Gordon. It was a split decision, at the very least, his only loss in the UFC, and that was almost 3 years ago, so he's been perfect ever since then. I think he's going to be able to find a submission later on in the fight against an aging KLOSE. KLOSE is fun to watch fight for sure, and, you know, but he can get sloppy at times, and when you got a guy that can submit you like that, you can't really be sloppy. Moving up the card, 2, Zachary Reese versus Cody Brundage. All right, newcomer and Zachary Reese after an armbar on the Contender Series. Dude, 6-0 with all finishes, okay? Actually, the only loss on his record at all was in the amateurs, and it was Kevin Holland that beat him, right? But even then, all of his wins in the amateurs are by finish also, so this guy literally has a perfect finishing streak, okay? Cody Brundage, in my opinion, has some of the worst fight IQ, maybe IQ in general, in the entirety of the UFC, as shown in his fight with Rodolfo Vieira, okay? I picked him to win that fight because I thought he would be able to not jump on the ground the second he thinks he's got Rodolfo Vieira a little bit hurt. I thought he would wait until he'd hurt him a couple of times before he went in for the finish, but he didn't do that. And then he got submitted, okay? And I'm never going to fucking forgive him for that, because it would have been a good pick and it would have been perfect. But he jumped down on the mat way too early. He puts himself in bad situations, and while he's got the experience edge and has fought real UFC level competition, I am going to be picking him to get finished in this one, right? Like, even the fight against Cedric Dumas, I thought he should have been able to win that easily, because we saw what Josh Fremd was able to do to him. Apparently not so much. Moving up the card, 2, Miesha Tate versus Julia Avila, okay? Both of these ladies would be technically considered geriatric, okay? But Jesus Christ, Miesha Tate's best days are definitely behind her. She's lost to she just lost to Lauren Murphy, which is not ideal. You know, Lauren Murphy, sure, she's tough as nails and whatever, but she's not that good, okay? Either way. She lost to Ketlin Vieira before that. She lost a grappling match at the end of last year. Like, she's having a hard time getting a win, okay? long in the tooth, best days behind her. She is the older fighter, you know, in terms of age and career both. So I'm going to go with Julia Avila to win by decision, maybe TKO, but I fucking doubt it. Okay, dude. Her only loss in the UFC is to Sijara Eubanks, which is not a good loss, but I will explain this, okay? Sijara Eubanks, to me, is like the Michael Johnson or the fucking Gerald Mearshart of the or the Paul Craig, pardon me, of the women's divisions. Like, there are ladies that she could have absolutely beaten. Now, you know, she had issues with her weight and shit like that pretty consistently. There were ladies that she should have beaten that she just got fucked by, right? Not literally, but you know what I mean. And then there are women who she's like a fucking plus 600 against, and she blows them out of the water. She's very inconsistent, but regardless, I don't know that I'm going to hold that against her all that much, but I'm going to go with Julia Avila. I just think that Miesha Tate's game's probably a little outdated. She took a lot of time off. I don't even know why she's really still fighting. She's fucking pushing 40, dude. Okay, moving up the card, too. Punahele Soriana, pardon me, versus Dustin Stoltzfus, okay? Punahele Soriana is 3-3 since joining the UFC, which is not great, okay? But he's gotten some pretty nasty matchups, I'll give him that. Got finished by Roman Kopylov last time out. He had to fight Brendan Allen in 2021. Like, these are very good fucking fighters, okay? He's also got, he's got some good wins as well, and all three of them came by knockout, all right? Dustin Stoltzfus lost to Abus Magomedov, has not aged very well whatsoever, especially in the manner that it happened, okay? Nor does the one to Kyle Dawkins, really. So Stoltzfus, for me, is a little iffy. I am going to go with Punahele to get this one done, guys. Hard to put away, right? Roman Kopylov, I think, is the only guy that's finished him in the UFC so far, and that's including, as I said earlier, Brendan Allen. He's fought way better competition, in my opinion, and he clearly has nasty fucking knockout power, okay? So Punahele Soriana by way of knockout. Moving up the card, to Clay Guida versus Joaquim Silva. Clay Guida, hopefully, retires after this, okay? I'm going to be going with Joaquim Silva here. Guida just does not look the same when he fights anymore. He has, like, no defense whatsoever. It's like, oftentimes you hear this from older fighters where it's like your mental is so much better when you get older, but your body can't keep up with the mental. So, you know what to do better, but your body doesn't react in quick enough time. Like, the signals can't fire from your fucking brain to your body quick enough to actually do the shit that you know, right? Clay Guida literally can't get out of the way of a fucking shot. He looked horrible last time out, okay? His takedowns are way too telegraphed. I mean, honestly, fucking everything he does is extremely telegraphed. His style, severely outdated, okay? Now, Silva has lost to some older guys, or at the very least, questionable guys, right? We got Hakparast, who's not horrible, but he's really inconsistent. And Ricky Glenn, pretty old. Vince Pichel, pretty fucking old, right? But he also wobbled Arman Tsarukyan pretty badly in their fight just last time out. He's got some good wins, right? He's got a finish over Jared Gordon, not bad at all. He hasn't had a million fights, so he's, he's not nearly as long as the tooth, not nearly as much damage, not as old, he's a massive favorite. Joaquim Silva, I don't know if he gets the finish. Guida is actually, despite all things, a pretty hard guy to put away, especially by knockout. This guy doesn't have, Joaquim Silva that is, doesn't have a massive amount of submissions on his record, so I don't know. We'll see. When Clay Guida does get finished, it usually is by submission. Moving up the card, 2. Sean Brady versus Kelvin Gastelum. This is a tricky one to pick for me, honestly, okay? But assuming Kelvin Gastelum is healthy making this weight, which he definitely seems to be. I watched an interview with him earlier. He looks very good. He doesn't look like he's unbelievably drained yet, and we're already almost halfway through the week, right? So, assuming that everything's fine with the weight, I think he should probably be able to finish Sean Brady. Brady's striking is not good at all, okay? And the only two guys to sub Kelvin were, 1, middleweights, and 2, only one of them was from like a top game type shit, which is what Sean Brady likes to do, right? Like, Sean Brady fans like to bring up the fact that he beat Paul Craig in a grappling match. What really happened was, technically he did, yes, but he just basically applied so much top pressure that Craig couldn't work any actual jiu-jitsu game, and he just rode it out for the decision victory or whatever, right? There was no submission there. Sean Brady loves to use top pressure, top game. Chris Weidman obviously submitted Kelvin Gastelum with that same sort of style. He arm triangled him, pardon me, Jesus. But Chris Weidman's fucking huge and has fought at light heavyweight. He's a big boy, okay? And that was also a while ago, right? Before Chris Weidman is what Chris Weidman is today. So, Also, Sean Brady is one of the only fucking guys that Bilal Muhammad has been able to actually put away with strikes. And he might be the only guy that Bilal Muhammad was able to put away with strikes. that he didn't have control of him on the ground first, okay? He doesn't seem to have the best cardio, because that was kind of what happened in the Belal Muhammad fight. Belal just started to take over slowly as the fight went on. And if he can't get you down and implement the game plan that he wants to, it seems as though he tires even a little bit quicker, right? Like, Belal Muhammad wasn't just going on his back and letting Sean Brady do what Sean Brady wants to do. It was a fucking problem, and then we saw what the result of that was. So, one, as I said, I don't think Kelvin Gastelum's going to be easy to take down, especially not from a fucking welterweight, when he's been used to dealing with boys that, you know, could make light heavyweight at times. And I don't think Sean Brady's going to whip out a fucking Imanari roll to leg lock Kelvin, so, you know, I don't see that happening. And if it stays standing at all for, like, more than a couple of minutes, I think Sean Brady's going to get fucking knocked out. Because Kelvin Gastelum, despite, you know, how out of shape he usually is, what carried him in the larger division was his hands and his speed. And now he's smaller, so I would imagine he'll be a little quicker. His power seemed to translate against much larger opponents, right? Like, he wasn't up there because he was 225 shredded and he didn't want to fight at light heavyweight, so he cut a fuck ton to get to middleweight. He was like, I want to eat and be fat, so I'll just stay here. But I have a feeling that he puts him down with like a straight left or some shit like that. Moving up the card too, Rob Font versus Deiveson Figueiredo. It's another tricky one, honestly. Rob Font showed us that he can easily be controlled on the ground in his last fight against Corey Sandhagen, and somebody like Figueiredo who can sub you the way that he can sub you, that could potentially be problems for me. I could see Rob having success in the boxing, considering Moreno had some success with his jab also. Now, Moreno's jab comes from down low. It's a little bit different, but still, you know, I could also potentially see Figgy going for some grappling, though, if that is the case. Font's never been knocked out, and he's fighting hard-hitting guys up a weight class from what Figueiredo's used to. So I don't think Figueiredo's going to be able to just knock him out like he would be other flyweights. But almost all of the guys that Font has KO'd have been known for chin issues to a certain extent, and then, of course, exposing Adrian Yanez for not being nearly as good as people thought he was. Last time he was subbed was by Pedro Munoz, and this is what's getting to me. So Font will have a decent reach advantage and a decent height advantage over Deiveson Figueiredo if we're talking about striking, obviously. So in theory, he could keep Figgy off of him, keep poking out that jab, maybe some leg kicks, shit like that, right? But Figueiredo is similarly sized to Pedro Munoz. Pedro Munoz is a savage, and he's extremely hard to put away, and all of this shit, like, all of it's true. He's much shorter. He's got one of the shortest reaches, I think, in that division, and he was able to guillotine, I think it was a guillotine, Rob Font, right? So, considering a guy like Corey Sandhagen was able to just completely dominate Rob Font on the ground, and Corey Sandhagen is not necessarily known for his grappling abilities. Obviously he can grapple, but it's not his main game plan, whereas Deiveson Figueiredo is fucking nasty on the ground. Okay, so I am going to go with Deiveson Figueiredo to get this one done by submission late in the second round. As I said, he's very similar built to Pedro Munoz. I know MMA math doesn't work like that, but I just don't think that Rob Font has the kind of stopping power necessary to just flatline Figgy. I think it would take a little bit. Obviously, Font's a bit of a volume guy, aside from the Adrian Yanez one. And, yeah, so I think Figueiredo gets him out of there. Second round. I don't think Figueiredo has any easy fights after that. I think this is a good matchup for him, all things considered, at bantamweight. So, we'll see. Moving up the card. Jalen Turner versus Bobby Green. All right, I'm going to be going with the short notice replacement in Jalen Turner here. I think he manages to head kick Bobby Green, who doesn't have a chin nearly as durable as Dan fucking Hooker, okay? Keeps his hands down all the time, and he does a lot of dipping, moving side to side and shit like that. That's like a head kicker's dream, okay? And Jalen Turner's very tall, so getting his leg up there to other guys in his weight class at their head is not that hard for him, especially if you're going to lean one way or the other, okay? I don't know that cardio is going to really play a role in this fight the way that it did in the Dan Hooker fight. I think that was more of like Dan Hooker breaking Jalen Turner's spirit by not going away, and Jalen Turner throwing absolutely everything he fucking had at him, and him still not going away, so that by the time he got to the second round, he was like, what the fuck, I already basically did the equivalent of like a 30-minute cardio session on the heavy bag, and this guy's still coming at me. Like, the amount of strikes he threw and landed cleanly on Dan Hooker was insane, okay? Bobby Green is not that. He's been knocked out a handful of times. Like, it's not, you know, I don't think it's going to be the same Same thing here. As I said, he'll have a good reach advantage, big height advantage, obviously, and I think that Bobby Green's style plays perfectly into somebody that likes to throw a lot of head kicks. And if he was able to land those head kicks cleanly on a guy like Dan Hooker, who keeps his hands up tighter to his face, not tight to his face, but a lot closer to his fucking face than Bobby Green does, and a guy who's taller, right? I think that Jalen Turner should be able to head kick Bobby Green here. All right, here we are at the main event. Beneil Dariush versus Arman Tsarukyan. Fuck it, boys. I'm going with Benny Boy to get the bounce back victory as a massive underdog here, similar to what he did against Mateusz Gamrot, who Arman was extremely competitive with, by the way, and Beneil Dariush schooled him. Again, I know MMA math doesn't work like that, but I feel like Beneil could kind of school Arman on the ground, I think. And while his striking is a little sloppy at times, and he did just get finished, right? That was fucking Charles Oliveira. Okay, Charles Oliveira is extremely aggressive. He's sophisticated in his striking. He's very fucking hard for guys to deal with. I mean, I did a video breaking down that head kick and how the first one that he threw was just a little bit off, and then he made the adjustment the second time around so that it hurt Beneil Dariush. Like, it was a sophisticated move that he did there and an adjustment that he made on the fly, all within a couple of minutes, right? That was in the first round, right? The best guy Arman has fought was Gamrot, who he officially lost to. I know that he, it was ultra close. He probably should have maybe gotten the decision, but still, right? That's the best guy that he's fought, and it was tooth and nail. Okay, I think Arman's going to try and land that head kick that Charles landed because he does throw a lot of head kicks. His striking is good. I just don't know how sophisticated it is. I just think that Beneil Dariush is going to be perfectly aware of that now, especially after what happened against Charles Oliveira. I think he'll probably have that right hand a little tighter to his fucking face because before, when he would throw, he would go to block and it would be like out here, not ideal. So we've seen Arman get wobbled by way lesser competition in Joaquim Silva. I know he's younger and he has, hype on him and shit like that, but I don't know, man. I think it's just hype. Arman's obviously very good. I'm not saying that he's not, but Beneil Dariush is a very good vet check, and he did it to Mateusz Gamrot, and I do see him being able to do it against Arman Tsarukyan. If Arman Tsarukyan goes out there and finishes Beneil Dariush, then fucking hats off to him. Phenomenal, right? But we'll see. Every really good opponent that Arman has fought, he's just came up a little short, right? Like the Gamrot fight was very close, and again, many people thought that he should have won, but still just short of winning. Islam Makhachev, right? I don't think that fight would play out the same today. I think Islam would probably finish him. But regardless, aside from those two fights and that one moment in the Joaquim Silva fight, he hasn't had to go through a whole lot of adversity. I don't think Beneil Dariush is going to go away as easily as people might think he is. And I think that Beneil Dariush always has that world-class fucking jiu-jitsu that he can use if he needs to get there. So, I'm going with Beneil Dariush, and I think that he'll get it done by TKO in the later rounds to vet check Arman Tsarukyan. And that is what it is, dude. Okay, anyways, that's it, dude. Like and subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. I will see you at the next video. Bye-bye.